Well, Nick Collier here again, and it's story time. I live in Nevada County, which is in the Sierra Nevada foothills, which is exactly this place 150 years ago where gold was found. And at the Sutter Mill, it's probably about 50, 60 miles south of here. John Sutter was digging up just in a creek, and he came up with a handful of gold. And the whole thing just went nuts. You know, you probably know the story, but you know, it's really what opened up California as a place to be, was the gold. Now, my story happens well, actually, over the last 45, 50 years that I've lived here, my story has, or this particular story has happened, probably 5 or 6 times. But this one particular time, we were at Oregon Creek Falls, which is the very place that I found Nevada County, and that story is on YouTube. And it's also the place where I went over the falls in my birthday suit, which is another story I told on YouTube. I've gone to that place, I can't countless amounts of times. It's this beautiful little swimming hole. It can't be, the pond can't be bigger than an actual swimming pool, a small swimming pool at that, with a couple of waterfalls and, just a natural environment you just wouldn't believe. So I'm sitting, and you get in the water and you cool off and you get out of the water and you sit on these just solid white granite blocks of stone that has been carved into these flowing, smooth rocks over the millennia. And you get out of the water and you sit down, and there's this one particular place where there's kind of a ledge, and it's a natural seat. I mean, it's almost as natural as the seat that I'm sitting in right now. And it's probably 20 yards long, and most everybody kind of sits along that and enjoys the late autumn and swimming in the water. So I'm sitting on this ledge, just kind of hanging out. The sun is behind the trees, so it's not real intense. And I noticed this guy come down and off of the trail and strip down and jump in the water. By the way, that whole place, for probably 4 decades that I've known about it, has been a nude swimming hole. But I think lately, in the last decade or so, it has gotten a little less naked and a little more clothing on. But at that point, it was nudity was just a given. So this guy jumps in the water and splashes around a bit and cools off, and then gets back out and sits about, 10 feet from me. And, I'm kind of a friendly guy, so after a while I say, "Hey, how you doing? What you up to?" And he kind of gives me this kind of odd, sorrowful look. And he said, "Well, I've been digging gold." I said, "Really?" And I was casually interested because, in gold country, everybody's digging gold. I've never done it. I actually don't see it as gold mining. I see it as moving rock, because that's basically what you do, is move a bunch of rock and you find a little bit of gold. And that's just not my style. So I've, casually interested. I kind of wanted to keep the conversation going. My wife was sitting next to me, and we both kind of looked over at him, and he was kind of a rough-looking guy, hadn't shaved in a week, and he came down with old dirty clothes on and jumped in the water, and obviously kind of the water was the first bath he'd had in a week. And so I said, well, what do you mean? You been panning gold in the river? He said, well, no, we haven't been panning gold. And I just kind of waited for him to continue, but he didn't continue. Finally, he kind of looked over at me and he goes, we've been working a gold mine. And I know in this whole area there's gold mines everywhere. I mean, when the gold thing hit, everybody panned out the rivers, and when the rivers got completely panned out, they started finding little veins of gold just down in the dirt and following them down into mines. And everywhere you go in this county there's an old gold mine. Now most often they blow the face of the mine, and the mine you can't see it anymore. And then of course another 50 years goes by and the trees have grown and you really can't see it. He says, well, yeah, we've I read a diary written by this gold miner back in the 1800s, and he talked about this particular mine up in Allegheny, or up by Allegheny, and we've been looking for that mine, and we found it. And I went, really? And I was kind of a little more interested. He says, yeah, we he gave clues, but we weren't sure where exactly it was at. And we traipsed over this entire countryside, this particular area, looking for the mine, and couldn't find it. Finally, one day we found an air vent. And we weren't sure that the air vent was the mine, but oftentimes the mine would go in so far, then they'd have to dig up and get an air vent, or else, everybody would expire. So I said, no kidding. So yeah, he says, and we've been digging that air vent for 2 years. I went, 2 years? He says, yeah. And this was the part, the kind of sorrowful part. He says, yeah, I lost my job. My wife divorced me during that 2 years. And we've kind of been, me and my buddies been digging on this mine for all that time. I says, well, what do you mean you found an air vent? He said, well, yeah, the air vents are, big enough for a person to fit in. So, and what happened is in the 40s, or not 40s, the 30s, just prior to the World War II, the government took over all the gold mines. And the government said, okay, any gold, you shut the mine down. Any gold that you've got to cash it in with the government, and the government buys it at a discounted rate, of course. And so the story was that the gold mines didn't really like that arrangement, and so they took a lot of their gold and they took it back into the mine and stashed it. And he said, and we've heard story after story where people have gone into these old mines and found the stash. He says, but nobody's found this mine. And we finally dug down far enough that we've hit a chamber. And I went, no kidding. And he said, yeah, we had to go down this shaft, and it was about 100 yards down, and we had to hand pick every rock out of the shaft because they filled the shaft full of rock. And it's taken us a good year to do that, and one rock at a time out of this shaft. He said, but we finally got down into a chamber, and there's all kinds of fingers going off of the chamber. He says, and once we got into the chamber, we could kind of walk around and see what was going on. And we found a safe. I went, really? Really? He said, yeah. He says, we just opened it just the other day. I said, well, what was in it? He said, well, not as much as I'd hoped. He said there was some money in there, and there were some papers in there, and there were some deeds, and but no gold. He says, but we're not stopping looking. And we haven't explored all of the mines yet, but we're still going to do it. We're still going to continue. And I says, but you've been working on this 2 years and you haven't made a penny? He said, well, a few $100s in that was in the safe. He said, we were able to sell the safe too. I said, really? He says, yeah, they blew the mine back in the 40s, and that was it. But we feel like there's still a stash of gold in there. We're looking at every nook and cranny. And, you know, I look at this guy and I'm thinking, man, he's got it. He's got that gold fever. You know, and you go down into these rivers and you go down into these little areas where there's some miner that's got a pan and that's got a sluice box, and they, oh man, they're going for it, and they come up for air, and you talk to them a little bit, and they have that same look in their face, that same kind of lost, sorrowful look, and of course, unless they have gold. But the fact is even if they have gold, even if they found gold, they're not going to tell you because they don't want to give it away. And I respect that. So this guy, you know, he, after a while, he packed it up and left, and that's the last I saw of him. I'm thinking he's probably still down in that mine, digging around, looking for that stash of gold. This is Nick Collier, checking out.